before you go any further, what everybody's asking me what your last name is.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know what name you're going by now.
Yeah, so I'm Ben Van Voorhis. So yeah, my legal name is Smith, but as many of you may know, the name Ben Smith is not Googleable. You can't find it.
Okay, that explains it.
And Van Voorhis is our family name basically.
Yes.
So that's what I've been using.
Would you spell that?
VAN space VOORHIS.
With capital V's on both of them.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. for
I
clarifying.
stole somebody's chair, so I apologize for that.
You guys all have to share a chair.
We could play some music and whoever doesn't get sat down.
There you go. That'll work.
Chair.
Youngest person gets to stand.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so before we get going, I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. So, like I said, my name is Ben Voorhis. I'm a writer, editor, journalist. So I've published in places like the Masters Review, Salamander, Nimrod, International Journal, Matchbox, mostly short fiction, some essays. I do a semi-regular kind of column for the Masters Review that's sort of breaking down short stories and taking apart how they work and stuff like that. So I've edited a bunch of different journals. I managed Willow Springs Magazine for a couple of years. We published, fiction, poetry, nonfiction, all that kind of stuff. I'm currently on the staff of Guernica in the Masters Review. I got my master's in writing fiction from Eastern Washington University a few years back. And I've worked as a real estate writer, I've worked as a tech writer, so anything involving writing language, I've sort of got my hands on it. And the last thing I do is I run the Drop In and Write program for Spark Central, which, if you're not familiar, is located in Kendall Yards. It's a pretty cool space. Mainly what we do is every week, just, anybody can come in and get some writing done, talk about writing and that kind of stuff. It's a, great space if you ever want to stop by. It's Thursdays at 5:30.
What is that called?
It's called Drop In and Write. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to fluctuate from the mic, so if you can't hear me, just let me know. So that's a little bit about who I am. I'm here just to talk about writing as a craft. So from what my understanding is, you've had a lot of people talk about, the publishing side of things, the book selling side of things. But I really want to tackle, this thing that we call writing and how to do it, because it's a little bit nebulous, it's a little bit floaty. And there are a lot of different opinions on what we do and how we do it. So instead of sitting up here and just talking at you for a couple hours, which I don't want and you don't want because you don't want that, I want to do something a little bit more conversational, a little bit more interactive. So here's what I want from all of you. So I kind of want to go around the table here, have everybody give me your name, talk very briefly about what you're working on or the kind of fiction that you like to write, and tell me about one kind of element of the craft of writing that you would like to improve at. No matter how good you are at anything, you can always improve. So for example, I already told you my name, I really like to write kind of weird fiction. I like fiction that has kind of a surreal elements to it. And like I said, it's mostly short fiction. And something that I always feel like I can improve at is story structure, right? I can always think about, okay, what is the information that I want the reader to have? What order do I want them to have it in? And how can that be a little bit more thematically resonant and resonant with who the characters are and what they want and all that kind of stuff. So that's something that I'm always looking to improve at. So let's just go ahead and start over here and have everybody just talk about those three things. Does that sound good?
My name's Carl Northrop, a.k.a. Nathaniel Bennett. That's my pen name. I write almost exclusively fiction, unless I'm writing about fiction. My background in writing actually started about 30 years ago, but when I really started getting my writing out there, I was writing plays. And I write in character, and that translates over into my books and stories. Is I write as the character, whoever they may be, and I really enjoy a good character, not somebody who's typecast. So that's basically my writing style. I have historical fiction, I have sci-fi, I've got a little bit of blanks. I got a lot of blank pages right now. No.
Blank pages are great.
Yeah, you can always fill them in.
Yeah.
Fantasy, a little bit of fantasy. I also have other writers who don't necessarily want to go to all the hassle of writing an entire book and publishing, so they give me short stories, and I am putting them in my short story book, which is my next book out after the one that I'm just done, got it edited, published.
Yeah. So what's like an element of the craft of writing that you think you can improve at, whether it's building characters or pacing or even revision or generating ideas, something like that.
Well, I'm not quite sure. There's other people who they're planners or plotters. I'm a pantser, and I literally do not plan out anything as far as how the book is going to go.
Yeah. How many people write kind of the same way, not planning anything?
See the pants.
Okay. And how many people really like to plot everything out?
I don't do, I do a mixture of both of them.
Right.
I'm in the middle.
Yeah. So is everybody familiar with this concept, this sort of planners and pantsers kind of thing? Yeah. So the terms that I think George R. R. Martin was the one who called them gardeners and architects. It was his sort of term with them, which I really like. So an architect is going to build everything from the ground up. They're going to be very methodical about how they're doing it, and a gardener is going to, I don't know how well this analogy is working here, but it's a little bit more improvisational. You're growing things as you go, and I like that way of looking at it too. Do you see that as something that you would like to change, or do you see that as something that works for you?
That really works for me.
Okay.
Even though I am a custom table builder also, my custom tables are a little bit on the fly. So I don't have drawings of any of them.
Right. Well, the cool thing about writing is that most of it, in my experience, happens in revision. So even if you are somebody who just sort of goes by the seat of your pants, you go back to this draft that you have, and you can build that intentionality into it, which is, I think, is something that's really important, because if you don't, as a reader, get a sense of that intentionality, of that purpose, then you're not really going to trust the writer, right? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. You want to take this one, Bob?
Okay, I think everybody knows me. I'm Bob Mannion, and I was just standing there a little bit ago, as I hope everybody remembers. And myself, I have a very short-term memory. I don't remember anything. No. I've got 8 books that I've finished, and what I like to write, I don't know yet.
That's a great
I
answer.
really don't know what I really like to write. I've got 2 books going right now. I just finished Bob's Shorts over there, which is a collection of short stories and a couple of snits that things that piss me off about what's going on. I wrote, there's some nonfiction stuff in there. I wrote about decisions and how we all have to make decisions. And there are 3 instances, and they deal with people that everybody in here probably knows, at least some of them, the people. What do you say to the First Lady when she comes to the door and it's raining? Good morning, Mrs. Kennedy. And so I did, and she said, damn, it is morning. I said, yes, ma'am, what else are you going to say? Things like that, and I was told not to open the damn door. But it was raining so hard, she's coming up in the rain. You're going to let her stand out there? No. But the Secret Service agent come up there, that, he said, I told you not to open the door. I said, and he goes, good decision.
So what is an element of your writing that you feel like you can improve, that you're looking to improve?
What I'm looking for?
That you're looking to improve in your own writing?
What I look for in my own writing?
Yeah, what are you looking to improve?
Readability.
Okay. When you say readability, what do you mean by
If
that?
you can't read it, it's no sense writing it, right? Anybody disagree with that? But I have a problem sometimes writing dialogue, but being an anthropologist, I can get, each person's head, and usually I can get through 3-4 people without getting too confused. One of the things that I don't do that I should do is I don't script out the plot beforehand. I just get in there and let it go. Especially with the vampire books that I wrote. I like to write fantasy, but I also like to write about people, and people that we can all identify with. It's my difficulty is if I write a program or chapters and what I want to say, and I don't follow it very well, I get pissed off and start over. I also like to write at least 2 stories at the same time because they feed on each other. Just say, hey, I can use this over here, or I can use that over there. And I find that works a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah. And language, I read books that, hey, I gotta look up the word. I gotta look up the word. I shouldn't have to do that. It just happened to me a couple days ago, and I'm used to having long words. But hey, if I have problems, then somebody else is going to have problems. Don't put it in the book.
Yeah, one of the things that, has anyone here read Stephen King's On Writing? Okay, great. Yeah, one of the things that he says in that book that I really love is, use the first word that pops into your head, right? Don't try to search around for some, bigger, fancier word because, that's not going to be what's most appropriate to what you're writing. I want to go back to one of the earlier things you mentioned. How many people here struggle writing dialogue? Yeah.
I have trouble writing dialogue.
Yeah. So what for those of you who raise your hands, what about the process of writing dialogue trips you up? Yeah, go for it.
Giving each character their own unique voice and not making it seem like it's just me telling a story.
Right. Yeah. So not making it sound like it's just you sort of talking. Have you found any strategies to kind of deal with that issue?
Not really. I'm like those two gentlemen. I am flying by the seat of my pants working on a novel, which is before it. Anyways, I kind of have like a style, I guess, but trying to find a way to give each character their own unique voice. I guess I do that by, or at least the way I try to. I'm kind of making this up on the fly too. The way I try to do that is like maybe give someone like a unique dialect. Like I have a character that is briefly in the story, but he speaks like someone from the deep south, kind of like from Alabama or something like that. He's like, "You there better stay away from my dog,"
Right.
And something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how appropriate that is, to be honest.
Right.
That's what I did.
Yeah, dialects are really tough because if you don't get it pitch perfect, somebody will know. And so the one piece of advice that I would give about dialects is if you're going to go for one, go light with a really, really light touch. Maybe give just a little bit of something to clue the reader in, because if you try to go too heavy with it, if you do sort of the, apostrophes everywhere, remove the G off the end of every sort of gerund, there are readers who are from those regions that are going to go, that doesn't sound right. That's kind of hokey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think with dialects having a light touch is a really good thing. But I think that there are a lot of other really simple ways to try to give characters their own voices. And one of them is simply to just give them words that they like in particular, that say something about them as a character, that are either verbal tics or that they can repeat, maybe not too much, but so that's one strategy that you could use. Yeah.
One other thing is that when you're writing about a story that took place, 3,500 years ago, you can't use dialogue that didn't exist. You can't use the words, like you can't talk about a stop sign, you can't talk about a car or an elevator and stuff like that. Doesn't exist. So you're limited in the words that you can use. You're also limited by the culture that you're writing about and where it is. And it's good to understand that if you're going to write about history, you have to write about that culture and that time in history. And people have a tendency to use words, common words, today's words, writing about history and dialogue.
Right.
And it's a trap.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes true. So a story that I would recommend to everybody that's really interesting in this perspective is a story by Wells Tower called Everything Ravaged, Everything Burned. And it's about Vikings, but it's told in this very sort of colloquial, vernacular kind of modern speech. And it creates this really, really interesting contrast. So I think that's true most of the time, but if you can intentionally break that mold and do something that with a lot of contrast to it, it's going to create so much engagement in the story, and it's going to create so much interest in what you're doing because it's not the expected thing, right? But yeah, I think research is incredibly important if you're going to be doing that. And the other thing about dialogue is that I had a professor say once that if you sit down and you actually just listen to people talk to one another, if you listen to two people have a conversation, it doesn't make any sense. People don't make sense when they talk, right? So what we're really writing is not realistic dialogue, it's stylized dialogue. And so you have to find a way to stylize in a way that sounds real to the reader, which is really tough. And so that's why we have these strategies like dialects or like finding verbal tics or words that, other characters might not use because we want to trick the reader into thinking that it's realistic speech. But the other thing that you can do is, make people stumble over their words. Make people use the wrong words and say the wrong things. Because we do that every time. I'm doing it constantly. As I'm sitting up here talking, I'm saying the wrong things. And, that's a great way to just humanize people. Or also to make sure that you have characters that don't say the wrong things, because that says a lot about them as a character. Which is, I think, what dialogue is really about. At the heart of it is characterization. Every choice that you make tells you something about who it is that's speaking and what they want and how they're going to get it. And I realize as we have started jumping off in these conversations, we're not going to get through everybody, so that's fine. So if anybody actually really wants to jump in and talk a little bit about something that they feel like they can improve in their own writing, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going around the table. Any volunteers? Yeah, go for it.
Everything.
What's the number one?
Well, okay, I'll kind of just do what you said. Hi, my name is Shane. So my writing story, like where I started is like about second, third, fourth grade. I mean, at this point, I didn't realize what I was doing, and I like reflecting back, I realize now. But it's like the moment, like this is my first like attempt at being a writer. I was in third or fourth grade and our assignment was to take these little pages, like a little book page, and a little paragraph for it, like just like space for a paragraph and a little blank space to draw a picture. And they were like, write. The teacher was like, oh, write a little story about whatever you want to write, or whatever you want to write. I ended up writing like a 9-page story at like 9 years old about a robot that came to life and became a boy's best friend. Although the real determining factor that turned me into a writer was I took mythology when I was in high school, and I had a teacher who at one point he said, everyone's going to write an origin story for an animal. And I sat there the entire class, I have no idea what we did in the class, and I just sat there and I was like, what animal do I want to write about? what animal do I want to write about? And he's like, just write why the penguin can't fly, or why the rhino's got a horn, or why tigers got stripes, or zebras got stripes, or why are fish in water, And I sat there the entire class just wondering, what am I going to write about? Trying to come up with something that I thought would be cool, because I was kind of a creative person, as we all are. At the end of class, I walked up to the teacher and said, hey, I can't think of any animal. He's like, do you have anything you would like to write about? I said, I'd like to tell a fictional origin story for humans. And he said, go for it. And again, it was supposed to be about a 3 or 4 page short story. I ended up writing 12 pages by hand because I didn't have a computer at the time. And turned it in, and then he sat me aside and said, Shane, have you ever thought about being a writer? And I was like, no. And he was like, he said, well, Shane, you got metaphors, and like you have a structure, and like there's emotions, and because of that teacher, I had this wild idea to be a writer one day. And then throughout the years, I kind of off and on tried to do that between surviving as a 20-something to now 30-something young adult, and like figuring out life, and
So what is it that now that you're working on your own stuff, what is it that you find that you really would like to improve on in your own?
Honestly, consistency and motivation with writing.
Okay.
Like the act of writing itself. I mean, like personal issues come up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I guess, because I don't know.
I think it's all about habit building. I think it's really just about telling yourself, okay, I need to write however it works for you, because I think it works differently for everybody, but telling yourself, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words a day. I'm going to write 100 words a day. I'm going to write for 15 minutes a day. Like, I really think that that's the best way to do it. Or just saying, I'm going to wake up every day at 7 o'clock and I'm going to write for 10 minutes, and that's the writing I do every day. And if you can build those habits, and if you can get into that routine, that's the best way to do it. And I don't think there's a better way.
I think that's something that we all have a problem with, probably.
Yeah,
I read a quote that Ernest Hemingway said that when someone asked him what was the hardest thing about writing, and he said, getting your butt in the chair and doing it. So, and that,
That's a good quote.
yeah.
Yeah, and there are tons of famous writers who've done it so many different ways. The one that I am familiar with that's more recent is anyone familiar with Haruki Murakami?
Yes.
Okay, so he's a Japanese novelist, and he's also a long distance runner, and so he'll get up in the morning, he'll write for like 5 hours straight, and then he'll go run like 20 miles, and he just does the same thing every single day. And you don't have to be that ambitious about it, because this guy's insane. But I think what you just have to do is build that habit for yourself, because if you don't build the habit, you're just not going to do it. And there are plenty of writers who haven't written for a month, and then they write 10,000 words a day. And if it works for you, it works for you. But if you're looking for consistency, it's just about routine, I think. Yeah. Go for it.
He's going, I might as well go too.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm Jerry. My first time here.
Me too.
I've been
So I'm a full-time, or should I say, full-on fantasy writer. Like, that's all I do.
Mm-hmm.
And with a little sci-fi mixed in with it too. And world building, like Tolkien, for instance, Lord of the Rings. That's my biggest influence. And one problem I have is getting something done, like finishing something, because like a lot of times I'll go on like halfway through it or whatnot, and then I feel like, well, it's not really going like the way I wanted it to. And then I find myself starting a different project because I feel like the direction's a lot easier.
Don't be afraid to let it be bad. To let your first draft be bad. Because you can always go back and fix bad writing. And first drafts are always bad. I think one of the most important things that we can sort of do as writers and as artists in general is let ourselves fail, because you learn from it. And that sounds a little bit cheesy to say that, but I think that's really true when it comes to writing in particular. Because if you try to make yourself be too perfect halfway through. Yeah, halfway through that first draft, you're never going to finish the draft. You're just going to try to keep going back and fixing it and fixing it and fixing it. And by the time you get to the end, you'll realize, oh, well, now I need to go back and fix this thing that I already fixed. You know, I feel like a lot of us have been there. You know, I think the solution is just, if you notice it's not going the way you think it should be going, just keep writing. Pretend that you've already fixed it, right? Somebody gave me that piece of advice, and I can't remember who it was. One of the teachers I had basically said, if you notice some glaring plot hole before you're done with a story or a novel, just pretend like you've already fixed it and keep writing as if you've already done that, and then go back later. Because you know, having a finished product in front of you is going to give you so much more motivation to go back and actually work the thing to completion. Yeah, go ahead.
In defense, in defense of a long distance runner,
Mm.
being a former marathoner, you'd be surprised when you go out and you take off 15, 20 miles, how it clears your mind. Because what are you thinking about? Putting one foot in front of the other? That's going to come automatically. You start thinking about your story, and you start rewriting it in your head. You get through some blocks that exist. That's an easy way to get through it. Can't run? Go out and walk. But clear your mind.
When you were talking about if you were more like an architect or a gardener, I go to the garden.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm literally a gardener, and that's where, like you said, the inspiration just comes when you're just reading and get rid of that out of your head. Then it just flows in.
Yeah, I think there's a good reason so many of us get ideas in the shower, because we're not doing that. We are forced to sit there and just, I mean, there are people who listen to podcasts or music or whatever in the shower, but you know, so many of us are just forced to stand there and think about nothing but like, okay, I'm here, I'm in the shower, and then stuff start popping in there.
Not a jacuzzi, because you can get some really good ideas, but really bad ideas too.
Yeah.
So.
But one of the things that actually you said earlier that I really loved is, you know, thinking about, okay, what's in the cabinet? Let's write about what's in the cabinet.
Anything.
Yeah, it's really true.
Anything.
And the other thing, you know, when it comes to, you know, thinking about what you're writing is that I think a lot of us, because we are writers, are sensitive to, you know, thoughts about, like, you know, plagiarism and stealing other people's work. But steal stuff. When you read stuff, steal stuff. One of the so like I said, one of the things I do is I run this drop in and write program for Spark Central, and every time somebody reads their own work, the first question I always ask is, what can we steal from this? Because what you really want to be doing as you're reading other people's work is going, oh, they're doing this really cool thing. What if I do that but put my own spin on it? Right? I think that's really important.
Okay,
Yeah.
my turn.
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay, my name is Esther, and I write children's books, and I go to and I have two brothers who are so funny. They can be so just like comedians, and I wish I could put some of that in my books. I could be more humorous in my books. And I did a little bit in Poopy the Fly and Friends. There was some humorous things in there. But I mean, my brothers can just look at something and they look at some of my characters and say something really funny about them. I think, God, I wish I could have thought of that, you know. So I like to learn how to be more humorous.
And I think that's a really good question, because that's really hard to do, partly because so much of the way that we interpret humor has to do with tone of voice and has to do with context. And so if we're only reading words on the page, it's really, really hard to get that across. And so that's why I think so many writers who are famous for being funny, so if you think about Kurt Vonnegut, for example, the humor is really, really dry, because that's the kind of stuff that works on the page.
So, Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, where it's a little bit more in your face, because it's for, you know, it's for kids, and I think it really depends on who your audience is, right? If you're writing for kids, the humor can be generated by, well, let's, you know, put two silly things kind of next to one another, and that's gonna entertain, and that's gonna be funny. And I think when I read a book that I think is tremendously funny, it often has to do with contrast, right? Has anyone here read Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole? Okay, so it's a book I highly recommend. It's great. He's also had a fascinating life story, in case you're interested, but that's not the point. So this is the funniest book I've ever read in my life, and one of the reasons it's so funny is because it's about this character who is tremendously stupid and thinks that he is the smartest person in every room. And because you have this contrast between how he sees himself and how the rest of the world sees him, it generates all these incredibly funny situations because there's this extreme contrast. And so that humor is always generated from the character, right? It's never the author trying to be funny. You never, read a line and go, well, the author's just being clever here. It's this character getting into all these situations that feel really organic because they're arising from what this character wants and how he's trying to get it. I think that's sort of the way into that humor is by taking two really, really contrasting ideas and putting them together in a way that's not expected. Yeah.
Well, I had just on the subject of humor and color, and I write all kinds of stuff. But anyway, importantly, Patrick McManus was a funny guy. He happened to be friends with my husband's father, close friends. They both grew up in the Sandpoint area. But he sent me a book on writing humor called The Deer on the Bicycle. And it's a fantastic book on how to write humor.
It's a great title.
Yes. There's a story behind it, of course, because it's Patrick McManus. Mm-hmm. And his humor is more down-to-earth, country boy. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, I took some inspirations from that, too. And some of it is the ridiculous. If you can write something that's just almost unbelievable, that's a good way to write humor.
Yeah, I think
make it exaggerated.
Yeah, I think it really is all about contrast because when we think about exaggeration, it's this huge gap between what we expect to happen and what actually happens.
That's what you reminded me of.
Yeah. Okay, so back when I was thinking about just talking about character development, which obviously I did not do, I picked out some examples to read, and because we're talking about humor, I want to go ahead and read one of them because I think that this speaks to what we're talking about. Is anyone here familiar with Lena Crow? Okay. So Lena Crow is a Spokane author, so definitely check it out. This book is called Fire Season. It came out last year. She is incredibly talented, and I just want to read you a couple of paragraphs out of this first chapter because I think it's a great example of really, really humorous writing, and I think it's a really great example of character development. Okay, so the character we're working with is named Barton Haydale. The thing he was trying to decide where and when to kill himself. Barton had not set upon his path to suicide lightly. He'd assembled his justifications, which read as such. He was lonesome, he was generally disliked, and he was ugly. None of these conditions, he felt, had any hope of improving. They would only worsen as the months and years passed. Barton was 29 years old and the manager of the only bank in Spokane Falls. This position should have garnered him respect and power. It instead earned him nothing but ire from the local citizenry, who, it turned out, had little trust for institutions, financial or otherwise. As a result, Barton had not married or even made a single friend in his 6 years in Spokane Falls. The strain of this lonesomeness had taken a toll on him physically. He'd grown portly and unfit. He wheezed when he walked too quickly, and to top it off, he'd just the afternoon prior received a terrible haircut. Which is so funny to me because he's listing these justifications.
I couldn't hear what you said the last sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me read that one more time. Yeah, just the prior morning. And to top it off, he just the afternoon prior received a terrible haircut. Yeah. So his justification for wanting to kill himself is because he got a bad haircut. And so you're looking at that and you're seeing this huge gulf between what as I'm assuming a normal human being thinks of, okay, a reasonable justification for wanting to take such a drastic step, and somebody who thinks, yeah, I got a bad haircut, that'll do it. And I think that's the kind of contrast that I'm talking about. And we know so much about this guy, and these are like some of the first couple paragraphs in the book. We know so much about this guy, from the fact that he thinks that this is a reason that he should kill himself. Yeah. So anyone else want to volunteer to talk a little bit about something? Yeah.
I'll say a few words to make everybody feel so good about you guys. Because my name is Elena Smith and I come from St. Petersburg, Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And I came here 30 years ago when Russia was not a terrorist and fascist country. It was still famous for its writers like Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Pushkin, and I can continue the list. And I would have never, ever tried to write anything in Russian to compete with those guys. But when I came here, and there were not so many people from that place in Moscow, Idaho, and that's where I moved from St. Petersburg to Moscow. Yeah, funny. People, of course, asked me how I got there, and I would tell them little bits and pieces from different, moments of that long journey that I had to take to get here. And each time people would say, "Oh my God, it's so interesting, you should write a book." And I'm like, they're crazy, because I won't write it in Russian, and of course I can't write in a foreign language. Mm-hmm. And so, but life is, twisting, and eventually it did happen that I did write my book, which was fiction documentary, the first book, about how I got here, because everybody wanted to know that. Mm-hmm. And that was published in 2006. And done out of my system. It was fun actually to spread it around, because at that time not so many self-publishers were around, not so much competition.
Yeah.
And lots of people still were reading books instead of being on computers. Mm-hmm. And it was a really fun time for me in 2006, 7, and 8. And I returned the money that I put into its publication very quickly, because it wasn't that expensive to publish it and all those things. And then I thought I will never do it again, because I was just engulfed in my life trying to become an American, which I did become a real, true American, which I love. I love this country. And I had never been in Russia back, never, for 30 years. And I'm disgusted with what is happening right now, but it's not the topic of the conversation. And then there was COVID. And I was secluded like everybody else in the house, and I was so bored, and I tried to paint, which didn't work. So writing is closer to me because I've been teaching English, haha. Well, sorry. But I'm telling you, life is cruel. Well, anyways, the easiest thing for me is grammar. Because I know it. Because I had to learn it.
Right.
You guys can envy me, but I can tell you the rules about so many stuff that you're like, why is that so? But anyways, I wrote the second book and published it in 2023. What a completely different journey, And so if we talk about struggles, because this is what we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy for me to tell a story. I'm a storyteller. Since childhood, my parents never knew whether I'm telling them the truth or not, because I embellished everything. So that's easy. For me, it's the language. It's the idiomatic language. It's the feel of the language, because I can use a bad word and it doesn't sound to me like bad, because it doesn't sound my native language.
Right.
And sometimes people are like, are you vulgar? I didn't know, but if I translate it into Russian and say, oh my God, that is really terrible. But you don't live like that all the time, right? You don't check yourself all the time. So you guys, enjoy your life. You're writing in your language, and it's not a struggle for you as I have a struggle. But the funniest and the favorite thing for me is to give my work to somebody who is editing, the native speaker and the writer by themselves, and then they write back to me and they write, oh my God, I laughed so hard at this sentence, and I'm like, why? And then I reread, oh yeah. But I don't have that from the get-go, you know, I
Yeah.
don't feel it myself at the beginning. So that's my struggle, the language. But you can't stop me from writing.
I will not try to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I mean, that's a struggle for even people who are native English speakers to write something and have it sound like they want it to sound, right? Because I think we all have sort of an image in our heads of, okay, I kind of know that this is how it should sound, and then you write something out and you go, oh, that didn't sound right. And I think really a lot of that has to do with two things. One is just reading as much as you can, like just reading constantly, and also listening to people talk, right? And I think that that's something that all of us can stand to do a little bit more, because we think we do it every day, right? We talk to people, we hear what they have to say back, but we don't spend a lot of time actually listening to the rhythms of people's speech and listening to, okay, how are they phrasing this idea? What words are they choosing to use here, and what does that say about them as people? Because it's all character all the way down, right? And so I think, you know, that's something that's always really helpful to me, is even just going to like a coffee shop, for example, and, you know, sitting behind somebody and just eavesdropping on their conversation. And instead of paying attention to, okay, what are they talking about, pay attention to how they're talking about it, right? Pay attention to the rhythms of the words, where they're pausing, what words they're choosing to use, what ideas they're focusing on. You know, that stuff can make you a better writer, and I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I spent enough years as a waitress in Sambo's, IHOP, those kind of places, that I paid attention to the people and what they said and how they said it, and I have so many stories from my years that I spent, besides the fact that it supported me and my kids, you know,
Right.
Quite well. All of that has kind of contributed, and then little bits and pieces of people that I've met, I steal from them and put into my books.
Yeah.
And my characters, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of putting it crudely, but they're composites, amalgams, if you will, of the people that I've met in my life.
Right, and I think we definitely all do that. And one of the, going back to one of the things I was saying before, is, you know, doing that with a published book that you really admire is another way to do it. One of the most helpful exercises that I ever do, and I still do occasionally, is take a piece of writing that you really, really love, that you are like, I want to write like this. And even just for practice, basically go line by line and write each sentence and just copy each sentence, but put your own nouns in it, and your own verbs, and your own characters, and just copy the sentence structure, right? So emulate exactly how they're doing it, because you'll start to notice things that you don't notice as a reader, and you start to notice things that you would never have otherwise thought about, because, you know, you are literally copying what they're doing. And I've had published stories where they started out like this, and then I get a paragraph in, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I know where I'm going with this. But it starts off just being a copy of what somebody else is doing. And it sounds weird, because it sounds like, oh, you're plagiarizing this thing. Well, you know, that could be where it starts, but then you take it in your own direction, right?
You know, on writing dialogue, with your characters, you don't have to use good grammar.
Right.
Because most people don't use it.
No.
Well, I
No.
shouldn't say that most, but, well,
No.
And I used to use a tape recorder on my first book, and I would put down, read what I'd written, and then I'd play it back to me to see if it sounded natural. You know, and if it didn't, then I would, you know.
Right.
Yeah. And one of my characters, Mr. Inky, which a lot of you read his book, he's a talking spider. He doesn't use good grammar, but he talks a lot like I do sometimes, you know, like gist and things I've been criticized for.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of copied how I talk. And he was the spider with, you know, that doesn't speak good grammar.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
that worked for me.
That's definitely a way to do it. I've on that subject, I have one more example. I have so many examples that I brought. Has anyone here read Amy Hempel? Mm-hmm. So she's a short story writer. She's fantastic. This is just her collected stories, but she wrote this collection called Reasons to Live. That's really fantastic. And there's this story called Today Will Be a Quiet Day that I just want to read the very beginning of because it has really fantastic dialogue in it, and it starts really, really interestingly. I think it's the other way around, the boy said. I think if the quake hit now, the bridge would collapse and the ramps would be left. He looked at his sister with satisfaction. You were just trying to scare your sister, the father said. You know that is not true. No, really, the boy insisted. And I heard birds in the middle of the night. Isn't that a warning? Right, so we know exactly who this kid is right off the bat. And just because of the way we emphasize bridge and ramps in that first sentence, you know, that's something that maybe you wouldn't normally pay attention to when you're reading it the first time. Is like you're hearing that tone of voice of like this precocious little kid. Now the bridge would collapse and the ramps would be left, right? And then the father doesn't use any contractions. You are just trying to scare your sister. You know that is not true. So we get a sense of who he is because of the fact that he's not using any contractions. So these are little tiny things that you might not even pay attention to, but as a writer, you know, you gotta think about stuff like that every line. And they're really interesting, simple, you know, not in your face. They're not dialects. They're not, you know, really big verbal tics or character quirks. They're just like little speech patterns that you pick up on as you read. So I think that's a good example of exactly what you're talking about.
I have one quick one. Larry Danica. I find that a lot of times when I'm writing that I put the same word in the sentence above the next one, so I end up going to the thesaurus and trying to find a different word, just so it doesn't match up when and they look like they're reading the same thing.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad strategy at all, actually. The trick is to make sure when you're looking for a synonym to the word that you're trying to replace is to try to find one that feels like it's as close to the original word as possible. Because if you try to find one that's a little bit too far away, then it might sound awkward, it might sound a little highfalutin. But yeah, I think that's absolutely a good strategy, because I was talking about contrast earlier when we're writing humor, but I think contrast is important when we're talking about sentence structure, when we're talking about paragraph structure, right? So you don't want to use the same words over and over again because it starts to feel repetitive to the reader, in the same way that you don't want all your sentences to be the same length, right? One of the things that creates interest in a piece of writing on a sentence level, on a paragraph level, is varying sentence structure, is varying sentence length, is varying paragraph length. Because if you just have sort of those repetitive blocks over and over again, then it creates this kind of monotony, right? You want to have this really dynamic, sort of shifting, changing narrative, because that works for people. People like to read that. Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I hear so much about reading and how reading makes you live. And I have to say a few words about living life and living experiences.
Yeah.
I'm 91 years old, so I've had more experiences than anybody else here. Starting out in the Depression years, living, you know, I was very young. And during World War II, living during World War II, knowing what it was actually like during my sub-teens. And then getting into high school, I didn't excel in anything but athletics. I was a jock. I got a scholarship, college scholarship to play football, and I muffed that up by trying to get into the trying to fly jet pilot as a jet pilot. Flunked me out of my eyes, both the Navy and the regular Air Force. Experience like that. Getting married young, and having 2 kids, and going back to college, working in the field. I grew up in a family that work was everything, and working out in the field with the migrant workers, working all the time. I was a lumberjack for 5 years. There's no harder work alive. I mean, physical work than piling as much lumber as you can, as fast as you can, all day long. We bought a farm, and Lo and I finally, at the time we had 2 kids. 2 kids, decided to go back to college, and I may have had GI Bill. I didn't check into it, but we fought our way through that for 3 years. Got a great job. got a great job with the, I got a degree as a geologist, a mining engineer. I was lucky to get this job, which was an adventure. Every day was an adventure. I go out, I was out in the field. I was working in Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, all the up in the mountains, up underground, the old mines, evaluating things, seeing things, talking to people, different people, prospectors, different types of people. All through my life, working with these different types of people, knowing different types of people. I also had to write a lot, technical writing, as a geologist and as a mining engineer. And from there, when I retired, am I going too far? Okay. And that when I retired, I'd always my what do you want to call it? Aptitude test always showed writing and science. And that seemed to be the path I was following, although I wasn't thinking about it. So that came in my mind, and I thought, I would like to write maybe, but and I wasn't a good speaker, even though I raised quite high in my profession. I wasn't a great speaker. So I decided to enroll in Toastmasters. And I was in Toastmasters for 9 years. I gave over 100 speeches. I received a lot of awards for public speaking, and most of them were stories that I grew up with, and I made funny stories out of them or whatever. But that was a great event for me. I came to this club one day and I said, "You guys, I'm trying to get them to join Toastmasters." And I said, "You guys ought to join Toastmasters because it'll help you with your writing." And I ended up joining this club. So anyway, all those experiences build up in me, and I just had to get them out. I mean, the writing, not technical writing I had that down flat. But the creative writing, I had to learn. I had to learn it in my later years. One of the greatest books I read was called Emotions. And I learned to write about emotions because but there were things like that that really helped me. I enjoy writing. I don't get out and peddle my books very much, but I like to write. And I don't try and produce a lot of things. I'll go into a book and into a story and I don't. It's kind of dead ended. I don't like it. I'll just drop it, do something else. So for me, I guess you'd call me more of a hobby writer. But at my age, I'm not going to probably write another book. But anyway, there's more to life than just reading other people's work. You gotta get out there and live it. You gotta get out there and feel it. You gotta get out there and talk to people, talk to other people. Get out there and do things.
Yeah, I think they're
that's my advice.
Right. Yeah, there are two sides to writing fiction. Right? There's the what and the how, and I think if you just read other people's writing, you can get the how down, but you don't have the what, right? Because you have to know people, right? Because that's what we write about. We write about people, and so I think you're totally right in that any experience that you can take that's going to get you to interact with more people, especially who you wouldn't normally interact with, right? I think we're all very used to being in a social circle of some kind, where we see the same people over and over again. And I think anything that you can do that gets you out of that gets you to talk to people who you wouldn't normally talk to, is going to, make you more interested in people. It's going to let you see things in people that you wouldn't normally see. But I also think that you still have to be a good writer, you still have to read, because you might have the what, but you don't necessarily have the how, right? The reason that I tell people, I've heard professional writers say stuff like, I don't think you have to read to be a good writer. And the reason I really disagree with that is because you don't have the sounds down, right? That's how you get a feel for how the rhythm of it is supposed to sound, is by reading what other people have done, especially people you really admire, people in people whose work you gravitate toward, because then you get to read the stuff that you want to write. So yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think you have to have kind of both of those things. You have to have the experience. You have to have the know-how that you get from reading. Am I running out of time?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to kick me off,
Well, we are running out of time. We've got about 15 minutes left before we gotta really kick into gear about getting out of here, and we do have a few things left.
Sounds good.
Thank you. This
So,
was a really effective-
All right, yeah.